You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
I'm RJ Decker, a private investigator, uncovering the Sunshine State's darkest secrets.
Tuesdays, it's the premiere of ABC's hottest new crime show.
RJ freaking Decker, as I live and breathe.
He's a private eye.
It's not a standard murder, it's something bigger.
And a public mass.
Trying to get sent back to prison today?
You go to prison one time and suddenly it's all the jokes.
RJ Decker, series premiere, Tuesdays on ABC and stream on Hulu.
Your planet is now marked for death.
Marvel Studios' The Fantastic Four First Steps is now streaming on Disney+.
We will protect you.
As a family.
Light them up, Johnny!
Marvel's first family is certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes.
That is fantastic.
And critics say it's one of the best superhero movies of all time.
Oh!
Marvel Studios' The Fantastic Four First Steps, now streaming on Disney+. Rated PG-13.
What time is it, Ben? It's clobber time!
This episode is brought to you by our Patreon members. Thank you so much.
Join our Patreon for extra episodes, interviews, extra content, and to help support the podcast and help us continue to do the work we do.
Go to patreon.com/ancienthistoryfangirl to learn more.
We've just sort of accepted the fact, okay, well, the male gods are going to take power. And I really had to think about, but why?
I'm Jenny Williamson.
And I'm Jen McMenemy.
And this is Ancient History Fangirl.
We are thrilled to welcome back to the podcast Ancient History Fangirl fan favorite and our dear friend, Jennifer Saint. Jennifer Saint is the internationally best-selling author of Greek mythology retellings, including Ariadne, Electra, Atalanta, and the recently released Hera. Jennifer's brilliant novels focus on bringing the female perspective to the forefront of her myth retellings. And her latest novel, Hera, focuses on one of the most complicated and unsympathetic characters in Greek mythology. Welcome, Jenny.
Welcome!
Thank you so much for having me back on again.
So what drew you to the story of Hera?
Oh, well, so I should be really well practiced answering this question by now. But I always find it really hard to say what was it about this particular character, because I just think the character that I want to write about kind of gets under my skin, and I don't necessarily know why they are there, but I know that they are going to be really interesting if they've lodged themselves so deeply. And Hera definitely had, and in a way she'd kind of always been there, because she is a presence in my other novels, whether she's like named or a character or not, because Hera is everywhere in Greek mythology. You can't really get away from her. And, you know, I'd kind of dealt with the sort of challenge of writing a widely disliked or dislikable character when I wrote Electra. But Hera is really next level. And when it comes to writing a book with a feminist perspective, she seemed in so many ways to be an anti-feminist character, because she's always portrayed to us as this scourge of women and children. She is full of all of this rage, and the victims of her anger tend to be other women. They tend to be the victims of Zeus or the illegitimate children of Zeus. But whilst I didn't wish to deny any of Hera's kind of villainous mythology in any way, and I didn't want to write a novel that said, actually, guess what, guys, she's really nice, because she isn't, and I don't think our female characters are under any obligation to be nice. I think they can be as complex and as flawed and as difficult as male protagonists always can be. So I didn't want to make her nice, absolutely. But I think that one thing about Hera is that the way that we've received her stories has always been through the lens of the male narrative. We have always seen her embodying, really, I think, the worst of the misogynistic stereotypes, in that she is a jealous wife and she is a wicked stepmother, and she's like simultaneously really malevolent and also, God, so boring, what a drudge, she's so domestic, like she's just getting in the way of all of Zeus's exploits. She's such a nag, all of these kind of things that you know, men will denigrate women for being. And I just thought, well, maybe she did do all of these things, but actually, what does that story look like when we hear it from her perspective instead? I think it would look a little bit different. And as it turned out, It really does.
It is a really feminist act to retell Hera's story because there's so much injustice in Hera's story that is not emphasized when all you focus on is the fact that she basically persecutes Zeus's rape victims.
I mean, these things they are not they are not okay. But I just, Zeus, the way that we tell the stories of Zeus's behaviour tends to be almost like, well, that's just Zeus. What a rogue.
Boys will be boys.
Very much so. And I don't, he's not being held to account, but Hera is held so stringently to account. That is the double standard where, we've got to examine every facet of her behaviour and just kind of let Zeus get away with it all the time.
What made you think that now was the time for this retelling and reinvention of Hera's story?
I mean, I think for me, in terms of the books that I've written, it was just the natural evolution of the books, the direction that I was going in. I think that with every book, I will always want to challenge myself. I will always want to do something new and something different. And Hera felt like a really ambitious novel, the most ambitious novel that I've written so far. I mean, just the challenges of writing a goddess, of making decisions like, well, where will her story begin and end? How am I going to write a book that spans thousands and thousands of years? And all these kinds of questions that don't really get answered in Greek mythology about the anatomy of a god, about the geography and the physicality of the realms that they inhabit, and kind of how, there were just questions I had, like, we see them get injured in the Iliad, Aphrodite retreats off the battlefield, Ares retreats off the battlefield, very mournful when Athena, so we know they can get hurt, but they can't die. We know that they consume ambrosia and nectar, but we see them drinking wine. So there were just kind of all of these tantalizing ambiguities to fill in, which just gave it a whole new level of world building. I felt that this was really moving very firmly into the realms of, well, this is historical fantasy. This is not historical fiction. And I really enjoyed that because the magic of Greek mythology has always been my favourite part of it.
Yeah, and the non-linearness of so much of Greek mythology, like, the idea that they're drinking wine before Dionysus is born, but he's been around forever, but he's the person who invented wine. Like, I just love all these inconsistencies in Greek mythology because it opens the door to so many different stories and interpretations.
Yeah, I just had them drinking inferior wine before Dionysus.
As it would be. So Hera is the story of a woman who is thrust into the role of leadership. She is ruling a world in a way that hasn't been done before. This is after the upheaval, after the Olympians overthrow the Titans. What was it like writing the politics of Olympus? This is a very different departure for you. And how did you navigate showing Hera's desire to do good and bring order to the world while also dealing with the absolute fuck daddy chaos monkey that is Zeus and his affairs?
So the political aspect. So this bit that I guess was one of the most challenging parts, and also just one of the best bits to write, one of the best bits to really sink my teeth into. But what was fascinating about delving into that was, to what extent are we trying to explain the origin of everything, including how patriarchy begins? Because I got quite sort of hung up throughout this process of thinking about how the gods create human beings, but really it's gone the other way around, and human beings have created the gods. And so when I'm telling these stories about the gods, I'm telling the story of human feelings, desires, experiences, and also how exposing it is that these are the gods that people have created. What are we learning about ourselves if we are looking to gods like Zeus, gods like Hera even? So what I really wanted to delve into with a bit more kind of rigor and thought than I'd ever applied to it before was something I just accepted as, oh, here is a myth that I have never questioned, which is the division of the three realms amongst Zeus, Poseidon and Hades. And I had never particularly thought about that before until I realised this is going to be a scene in the book. How is it going to come about? Because we know that we have got 6 siblings, and we've got those 3, and then we've got 3 sisters. We have got Hestia, Demeter and Hera as well. And all of them are the children of Kronos. So all of them have theoretically got the same birthright to rule. And before there was Kronos, there was Gaia and there was Uranus. And in fact, Gaia is where everything originates. Everything begins with her. And this is a feature across other mythologies as well, that actually everything begins with a mother goddess. Everything begins with this female energy, with this female creativity. Everything kind of starts with a matriarchy when we go like right back to the beginning. And so at what point does that get hijacked? At what point does that become subverted? And how and why? Because these are stories that have been told by human beings, we've just sort of accepted the fact, okay, well, the male gods are going to take power. And I really had to think about, but why? And how does that feel for the three sisters who are left with not the ocean, the heavens and the underworld, but with the scraps that are left over for them, which actually are very important roles. You know, the harvest and the hearth are incredibly crucial. In fact, do we think of them as less important because they've then become associated with women, with the goddesses, perhaps? Because it definitely feels like the gods, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, have taken the main prizes. They have taken the power, they've taken the influence, they've taken the status for themselves. And most wounding is the fact that Hera gets left with wives, which feels a lot more intangible than, you kind of know what you're doing with the harvest, and Hestia at the hearth, she's got a very clear and defined role. And being the goddess of wives feels a lot more unclear. It feels a lot more, what is she going to do with that? What power can she possibly gain from being in charge of wives? And how brutally ironic that she is the goddess of an institution into which she was forced against her will because she never wanted to marry Zeus, and an institution that her husband then sets about undermining at every possible opportunity. That idea that Hera is jealous and that her punishment of Zeus's victims is motivated by jealousy, because we hear that word attached to her name all the time, jealous Hera, jealous Hera. It doesn't ring true for me. She's not jealous in a way that kind of suggests that she wants Zeus for herself, because she never wanted him at all. But it's certainly an insult to her role and to her domain and to her aspect that was thrust upon her, and that now she has taken on the mantle of, and she has to deal with the fact that it's continually insulted by him.
All of this is just making me think so much about the work that we did a couple of years ago about gender and the way that ancient Greek mythology essentially constructs gender for us in a certain way and culture. We did this whole series, Gender Rebels, about this. And the idea that the patriarchy involves unleashing women's rage on other women and channeling that on other women seems like a really fundamental part of Hera's role, because if she's the goddess of wives, her only power is over wives. So her only way to unleash her power is on other women. And so it's sort of like teaching women in real life, in history, who might not understand necessarily, because these gender roles are a new thing that the ancient Greeks were inflicting on people, how to be in this society where they, instead of being angry at their husbands, for example, for sleeping with hetairai, they would get angry at the hetairai.
And that has just endured. That is still something that we see today, and we still see women continually pitted against one another. And it's such a trope of the patriarchy, and it's such a weapon used to divide and conquer. And it's extremely successful in doing that. And it is really hard to see what are the influences that are shaping you. It's very hard to step outside of that and actually kind of do anything about it, because it's made you who you are.
Absolutely. I mean, I see this in U.S. politics all the time. How can women be conservative? How can women be, quote unquote, pro-life? Well, this is why, because the patriarchy turns women against other women.
Yeah, all competing for the approval of men.
Exactly.
And I think, Hera is the goddess of marriage and women in general. And she's just, her only power sometimes when she has this rage is to take it out on others, which is deeply saddening. But also, I know our friend Liv will talk about this, and I talked about this in the Gender Rebels series too. These are the stories that we have. Now, nobody knows if there are stories that we've lost that might have shown Hera in a different light. And I think there's a lot in here that we don't know, because those stories wherein Hera might have helped a woman or she might have come off more sympathetic have not come down to us, because they weren't deemed the ones that the world wanted to hang on to through the eons. We see her as quite a jealous goddess because that's what's come down through this lens. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's how she was in every story.
So this has just consumed me for the past year, just this idea of all of the versions that we do not have, all of the versions that have not preserved, that haven't been curated. Because I get asked, obviously, about this kind of new, I hate this word, trend, which it is not, of women telling Greek mythology. And I would just say, women have always been telling these stories. Maybe they didn't have access to education to write it down at some points in history. Maybe the people who were writing it down didn't think women's versions were important. But it's not like we just had Sappho and she was the only one. She was like a unicorn of ancient Greece.
I mean, first off, she was the unicorn of ancient Greece, but she was not the only one.
Look, if she didn't want a unicorn, she didn't have to unicorn. She's not going to hook up with your boyfriend.
I also think it's really, there's a lot of scholarship that has come out in, I would say, the last 20 years that has been focused on women looking at these figures and looking at life in ancient Greece. And it has really given us an insight we didn't necessarily have before. Like we talked about this also with what we can understand from the bones of things, the archaeology, like how we learned that there were female warriors or female soldiers. And when we would see certain graves, we'd be like, oh, it's got lots of war stuff. It's probably a man. But now we know differently. And I think a lot of times we get the same complaint, too. We get quite a lot of misogynistic trolls who are, very upset with the way we look at history and mythology. But the reality is, as we learn more, as the technology improves, and as more women and people of color are able to study this, have the knowledge and the access to it, which they didn't have before, we're able to see different insights into this world that makes it more diverse and gives us more information about these characters that we never would have seen before.
You do it all. So why not get all the electrolytes? Hydrate better than water with new Gatorade Lower Sugar. Now with no artificial flavors, sweeteners, or colors. And 75% less sugar than regular Gatorade. New to the fridge. All the Gatorade electrolytes you love. Gatorade Lower Sugar. Is it in you? Now available nationwide.
This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
Walmart Business saves you time, money, and hassle, which means you can focus on what really matters. Like putting the money you save back into what you do. Spending more time training your team, filling orders, and finding new clients. Anything and everything, right down to, oh, that's one, choosing the best hold music. Walmart Business. It's the Walmart you love, now for your business. Learn more at business.walmart.com.
So obviously Zeus and Hera is a very toxic marriage. Not a consensual marriage, as we discussed. What was it like for you depicting this relationship, and what did you learn about the characters as you were writing about their marriage?
So I think it's a relationship where when you look at it from a modern perspective, then you just really clearly identify it as an abusive relationship. And so I did a lot of reading up about the kind of the traits of coercive control, for example, about the kind of behaviors that characterize it, about the kind of red flags that exist. And those were all things that I built into Zeus's character, as, the original emblem of toxic masculinity that he is. So, the kind of various ways in which he makes Hera doubt herself, in which he humiliates her, in which you really see it in the Iliad. And I really love, so as I was writing, Emily Wilson's translation of the Iliad came out, and that's such a very accessible and believable way to read the Iliad. I think it really brings it to life. And so the scenes that play out between Zeus and Hera in the Iliad, this kind of battle that they're having alongside, above the battle that's taking place over Troy, is such an illuminating glimpse into the kind of marriage that they have, into the ways in which he uses these very overt displays of dominance in order to keep her under control and to stop her from acting. And she does, when he sends Iris down and says, turn your chariot back or else you will find out, basically, because Athena has not experienced Zeus's wrath before. And Hera says, yeah, okay, well, we're going to go back. We are not going to push this any further. But she finds other ways to succeed in what she wants to do. You know, she has to be a little bit more underhand. She has to always be one step ahead. And so you see the ways that she manipulates him and the way that she's a victim in this relationship. I think that we sometimes use that word victim and then sort of attach a lot of baggage to it that would make somebody weak or somebody passive, and that's who an abuser or a bully or somebody like that would target. But it's really not. You know, people who are victims of this kind of relationship or this kind of dynamic can be very, very strong, very powerful, very independent. And that just makes it all the more attractive to a man like Zeus to crush your spirit in, you know, a really kind of sick and awful way, like a worthy match. She keeps things entertaining for him, I think, is what it comes down to. And so there is not just hatred and contempt existing between them. They are in this game. And there are elements of it that both of them take some kind of satisfaction and some kind of pleasure from.
I think that is so, so true. And I remember reading that somewhere, that sometimes abusive men are more attracted to women who are strong and powerful because it's about that. This is a horrible, dark word in this context, but like conquering, subjugating of someone that's like more attractive to these people, which is just, that just makes my skin crawl. But I think that sounds pretty accurate to me.
I feel that is why Hera is the one that Zeus marries. You know, of all the women, of all the goddesses, of everybody that he uses and tosses aside and all the terrible things that he does to women, he sticks with Hera. And there is definitely a reason that he keeps her around.
Yeah, like look at this powerful woman that I brought to heal. I mean, this is kind of like the Greeks and Romans both wrote about. A lot of the time it was the Romans writing about people they conquered that way. Look at these powerful people that we conquered, you know, like look how strong we are.
I mean, that was the point of a triumph, right? Like to have these poor people who you've conquered and, you know, generally massacred or genocided walk behind your chariot to show you how great you were. I think one of the things about Zeus and Hera's marriage that really fascinates me, looking at sort of like who was telling the stories, who was writing it down, is that marriage very much looks like a very upper class marriage of some of these men who had a lot of time and were retelling these stories, like what their marriages might have actually looked like.
Well, I mean, I would say that I thought about this from the other side more, probably, which was the idea of Hera as a real figure in the ancient world, that women were actually worshipping, that women were actually going to the temple of Hera, and that they were making offerings to her, and that they were praying to her. I really thought about the role that she performed in women's lives, and why this woman who is an enemy to so many women. You know, if you've heard all these stories about these terrible, awful things that she's done to women, why would you go and pray to her? And I think, well, she's offering some kind of comfort. And part of that comfort, I think, comes from the fact that maybe she's in a marriage that looks like your marriage. Maybe you also were most likely forced into a marriage that you had no choice or consent, that wasn't required. You know, maybe your husband is repeatedly unfaithful and continually humiliating you. Maybe your husband is violent and abusive. And that has happened to the queen of all the goddesses, the most powerful figure that you can imagine. She's been through it too. And I think there is just an element of strength that you can derive simply from that aspect of solidarity. And I thought that she might also represent a kind of wish fulfillment in some ways, that although the targets of her rage might be misdirected a lot of the time, at least she gets to vent some of her rage. You know, at least she is able to exercise some power, even if you might disagree with the way that she chooses to do it. She's really playing an important role, an important function in women's lives. I really felt that she is important.
Hera does constantly punish the women and children of Zeus's many, many, many non-consensual affairs. I think maybe one or two of them were consensual, but I don't think it was that many. Like, I can only think of, like, the one. How did you reckon with this aspect of her story?
So, firstly, I think, there's a couple of explanations here, because she doesn't punish all of them. Like, that is true. We've got myths of women that she leaves alone. Like, she doesn't go after Danae, for example, the victim of the golden shower. She doesn't go after Perseus, who's a hero of Greek mythology. You know, he makes a name for himself. And Hera does not persecute those two.
Or Jason. She's like his patron saint, essentially, to use a more modern term. She's like his goddess.
Yeah. And she picks him to be her champion of the Argo. So either you can say, well, that's because, and this is the case, the mythology is not one coherent, consistent body, and like lots of people have told the stories, and so yes, they contradict one another, and so maybe that's why sometimes she's vengeful and sometimes she's not. Or you can say, is there some kind of strategy and some kind of reasoning behind her behaviour? And I think the major targets, if you kind of look at the ones who really, really suffer, it would be Heracles and Dionysus. They are the children of Zeus that take the brunt of Hera's wrath. And, she really puts the work into making their lives difficult and trying to, kill them. And she puts them through their paces. And they are the two children of Zeus who are elevated to the higher status, that Dionysus becomes one of the Olympians and Heracles becomes a demigod, he becomes deified rather, and he gets to marry Hera's own daughter. So they're the ones who are going to be really, really significant. And how do you get to be a really famous hero if you don't have an antagonist? Hera is actually, in some ways, doing them a favour by testing them, by putting them through their paces, by challenging them with all of these obstacles. Not because she wants to help them succeed. There's not like a kind of weird altruism going on there. But she does end up really legitimising those two illegitimate children of Zeus. And that kind of speaks to her not as somebody sort of acting irrationally, because, again, that's a way that we might demean a woman's behaviour by just saying, well, it's all come from this emotion. It's all just come from this outpouring of spite. She's identified the two with the most potential, I think, successfully. And what she does to them ends up elevating them in a way that maybe she would wish that it hadn't. But I think it makes sense that she's going after the victims of Zeus who are going to pose the most threat to her. Because if Dionysus gets to join the Olympians, if Heracles gets to be part of the family as well, then the gods are always very concerned with holding on to their own power. I mean, they're immortal, they're never going to die. So if they're going to lose power, it's going to be because somebody usurps them. It's going to be because somebody topples them. They have done it to their own father. So they are always aware that it could be done to them. And I think that Hera is, in some cases, she's thinking strategically, and she's thinking about how to maintain her own position and how to make sure, Zeus has got a lot of children and she doesn't want all of them. She doesn't want all of them clogging up the halls of Mount Olympus. So she's going to make sure that if they join, they've proven themselves, and she's done it rigorously enough that not all of them are going to be getting under her feet.
So Zeus and Hera themselves have a lot of children between them. But only two of those children, their two sons, become Olympians, Ares and Hephaestus, who may or may not also be Zeus's son. Sometimes Hera has asexual reproduction on that. I'm not sure. So why do you think that these two children are favored over their daughters, Eris, Hebe, and Eileithyia?
For the purposes of the novel, Hephaestus is Zeus's son. I went with that version. And and then they just have Hebe and Eileithyia. I mean, you have to draw the line somewhere. That in itself is a source of great irritation to Hera. But I had to think about why it is that she is having Zeus's children. And also that they do have that number of children together. But not that many over the course of a marriage that's lasted thousands of years. So you've got to think she's got something that works here, and she is not producing kind of as many children as you might expect. So there's got to be a reason for her to have them. And it just goes back to what I was saying about what the gods are afraid of, what the stakes are for the gods, which is that they will be overthrown by their own children. Zeus is really afraid of it. It doesn't stop him from having legions of children, but it is a worry for him that one of them might turn out to be like him and do what he did to his own father, what his father did to his father. There's a whole intergenerational cycle of, castrating and dismembering and imprisoning that goes on. So I thought, well, what would Hera's motivation be for bearing the children of Zeus? What does she want from it? I don't think it springs from any particular maternal desire. I don't think she wants to have his children. But maybe she wants children who will help her to get rid of him. Maybe she wants children who will be on her side. Maybe she wants to bring an army of gods into the world. And it doesn't necessarily work out for her. And I would imagine that she'd have really high hopes for Ares. He's a god of war. He's got the strength. But Ares doesn't seem to be interested in opposing Zeus particularly. So I think that's why, and Hephaestus is a disappointment to her for all kinds of reasons. You know, he's not the kind of child that she expects to have. And I think that it's the two sons who become Olympians because they're not enough of a threat to Zeus for him to deny them that status. I felt like, basically, what I felt like was that the children are a weapon between Hera and Zeus. Like any kind of toxic couple, they use their children as weapons against one another. And Hera's really hopeful of her sons, and they turn out to not be useful in the way that she thinks they will be. And Zeus uses both of them against her in quite different ways in order to hurt her, in order to control her. And then the daughters are just not interesting to Zeus. I think it's another way for him to insult Hera, to say, like, yeah, your daughters, I'm not even going to make them Olympians. I kind of made it his role to assign that status or not, because, again, in mythology, we've got all of these children, and sometimes they've got kind of godly powers. Sometimes they're immortal. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they become Olympians. Sometimes they don't. And you just sort of have to create your own reasons for why that is.
And I had never thought of it like that the two of their children who become Olympians are the boys, until I was reading your book and I was like, oh my goodness. Wow, what a slap in the face to Hera and his daughters. Like, that's really, really dark.
Patriarchy again.
It's just setting it up because Zeus does make his daughters Olympians. Athena and Artemis are both Olympians. Aphrodite, I always go with the castration film, but there is, I think, some mythology where she might have been his daughter, but I can't remember exactly what that is.
I have no time for that version.
Listen, that's like the Orphic Dionysus. I'm not here for it. But yeah, so I mean, he doesn't have a problem with giving his daughters that power. It's just his daughters with Hera, which is awful.
The daughters that he has who are most likely to rub Hera up the wrong way, right? The ones who are most likely to upset, annoy, and destabilize her, he gives them the power.
Pele, Hawaiian goddess of volcanoes, fire, and rebirth.
Maeve, Celtic warrior queen and nemesis of heroes.
Kiyohime, Japanese fire-breathing snake demon.
Pesta, Norwegian spirit of the Black Death. Our book, Women of Myth, is a fascinating look at women and femme characters in world mythology, including goddesses, heroines, and monsters. With captivating illustrations by Ringo Award-nominated artist Sarah Richard, it's the perfect gift for the mythology lover in your life, including yourself.
Find Women of Myth wherever books are sold.
How many discounts does USAA Auto Insurance offer? Too many to say here. Multi-vehicle discount, safe driver discount, new vehicle discount, storage discount, legacy.
How many discounts will you stack up? Tap the banner or visit USAA.com/auto discounts. Restrictions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Hera has a really unlikely ally in Echidna, the mother of monsters and the wife mate of the dangerous Titan Typhoon. What was it like writing about these enemies to sort of unlikely friends? Where did you find the common ground, and why was their friendship so vital?
You know, I'd had this starting point of the Hera that we know is this jealous wife. And, like I said, like a boring and malevolent character all in one. And the other aspects of Hera that I wanted to really bring to the forefront of the novel were Hera, the warrior who fights the Titans, or Hera herself, the mother of monsters, who's got this whole brood of terrible, monstrous, terrifying children, to whom she has, in my mind, much more natural kinship with than the children that she bears Zeus. And so there is a version where Hephaestus is born of parthenogenesis, and that's not the version I went with, because my much preferred version of Hera bringing a child into the world completely independently is when she is so angry, so furious with Zeus, that she strikes the ground and begs Gaia to make her pregnant, and it works, and she is just spontaneously pregnant, and she's pregnant with this creature who, when he's born, he's going to be as tall as the heavens, he's going to breathe fire, he's going to have snakes for fingers, and and snakes for a beard as well.
So many snakes.
So many snakes. I loved it. And then, that he gets to find love with Echidna, this kind of foul sort of serpent woman who's associated with kind of fetid water and disease and corruption, all these kind of fearful, terrifying things. I found it a really beautiful love story. I thought, finally, a romance in Greek mythology I can get on board with.
It's romantic.
It is. And it gives Hera the opportunity for this secret motherhood that she can actually enjoy, because Zeus has had no hand in the creation of these children. These are just hers. And it made sense to me that as a goddess who has been disenfranchised, disempowered, and robbed of her right to rule the way that she would choose to, that she would have this natural allyship with these creatures who are exiled, who are banished, who are kept underground, and who the gods regard as enemies. It makes a lot more sense that Hera would regard them as allies, because the Olympians around her, her actual family, are in so many more respects her enemies. The Typhon, Echidna, and their children have done nothing wrong. They're just existing, and the world will not allow them to exist without condemnation and judgment. And I felt that Hera would really understand that, and that she would feel connected to them.
I just love the idea of like a monster romance where both parties are monsters.
It makes me think of in Natalie Haynes' Stone Blind, she has this moment where Medusa's sisters are these hideous gorgons in quotation marks. And Medusa's explaining, like, she doesn't know that they're hideous. They're just these beautiful creatures, monsters to her. And I love that. That's what you're doing here. These two monsters, they're not hideous. They're not anything else. They're just made for each other. And I love it.
It's a fated mate story. Oh.
Yeah, I really liked it. And just the idea that when Typhon is born, he is the only possible match for Echidna. It's like he was made for her.
Hera and Leto have a terrible relationship. Hera even curses Leto not to be able to give birth anywhere on Earth. How did you deal with them as characters, and what did each of them tell you about power and the role of women in mythology?
There were some episodes where I thought this is going to be much harder to pull off than others. Maybe we can all get behind Hera in some ways persecuting Heracles. Maybe that's going to be an easier sell. But yeah, cursing this poor goddess, this Titan Leto, with something so cruel that she won't be able to give birth, and kind of leaving her trapped in this perpetual, unending, relentless labor. That was a difficult one.
Can we pause for a minute for those who don't know this story? Because I feel like it's a little bit more of an obscure one.
So yeah, she's a victim of Zeus, or I mean, I think that's unclear. We don't know. Is she with that? Is she having an affair with Zeus? Is she consenting or not? We don't necessarily know. I don't think from the sources that we've got. But she becomes pregnant with the babies that will be Artemis and Apollo. And it's those babies that Hera will not allow her to give birth to. So she knows that Leto is going to give birth to Zeus's children, and so she forbids her from being able to give birth on land or at sea. And then the loophole by which Leto is able to give birth to Apollo and Artemis is that Leto had a sister, Asteria, who definitely was a victim of Zeus, which makes think that Leto was also a victim, because I don't see her going willingly to Zeus after what he did to her sister, which is that he pursued her sister, Asteria, who's a goddess of shooting stars, another Titan, and he pursued her. She turned herself into a quail in order to escape from him, and then the quail either fell or dived into the sea, and when in the sea, transformed into a rock and became the floating island of Delos, which then ultimately becomes a real island. And so Leto manages to make her way to this floating island and somehow it's not quite land, it's not quite sea. She's able to give birth there. So that was like that really pushed all of my buttons, because this is like a story of sisters. I love sister stories. I was like, this is Asteria offers her this sanctuary, this safe harbour, this respite from the cruelty, which I just thought was very beautiful and definitely strengthened my perception of Leto as somebody who just never wanted to be involved with any of Zeus and Hera and all of their marital drama and chaos. And she, finds herself swept up in it. So trying to handle that story, because that doesn't show Hera in a very good light at all. For me, it was kind of the first time that she becomes aware of there is a real threat here. And it's that if Zeus is going to have children with somebody like Leto, who is a really powerful, really ancient Titan, then it's the first time she thinks, is he going to have children who will be a problem for me? And, she's not a fan of Apollo and Artemis when they're born. And possibly she's right about that. So she reconciles it to herself with just, I think, the sense that she always has, that she is in a war. The novel begins with a war. It begins with the war of the Olympians against the Titans. And for Hera, that war doesn't really end. Her enemy becomes Zeus, and it becomes the allies of Zeus. And so she's able to justify that kind of behaviour. And also that she thinks maybe she'll be able to put a stop to it, because maybe if she punishes Leto so publicly, because she tells everybody, like she warns everybody, don't you dare give Leto sanctuary, and everybody obeys her. And maybe she thinks, if I make an example of this woman, then nobody else will fall victim to Zeus. I mean, that's not going to work. I think she kind of thinks that might be one way to deal with it. Make everybody as afraid of her as they are of Zeus. And all it really does is put women in an even more impossible situation than they already were.
Which completely serves the patriarchy.
Yes, it does.
Let's talk a little bit about the other Olympian goddesses who are not children of Zeus. Hera, Hestia, and Demeter each have very different relationships with the world they rule and the gods, and mainly Zeus, within their world. Their relationships give Hera grounding and strength. How did you use the sources to weave together the characters of these goddesses?
Well, it was great when it came to Hestia, because there's just not very many sources. So there's one story about Hestia, which I did include, and that's about all there is to it. Apart from that, the story of Hestia being almost attacked by a rustic vegetable god, and then the braying of a donkey frightens. That's the myth that we have about Hestia.
I have never heard of this before, and I would love you to drunkenly tell me this on the Patreon.
Okay, right, that can be a drunk one. I mean, it doesn't take very long to tell, but okay, we'll do that one. Yeah, so that's what we have for Hestia. Like, we just don't have very many stories about her. So I really felt free to do whatever I wanted with Hestia as a character, to just ground it in the fact that there she is, goddess of the hearth. I feel like she has found herself a niche in which she can exercise power, because, hearth is important. It's like the central part of the home. Mortals are going to honour Hestia, and she's going to be a really central part of their daily life, but she can just stay out of everything else that's going on. She's almost plays the role of kind of the therapist on Mount Olympus. She can just sit by her fire, and the other gods can find like a little moment of peace when they're with Hestia, and she can kind of serve that role for everybody. She almost makes herself neutral. So I really enjoyed creating that character, because I think that really speaks to a quiet power that women can exercise that is overlooked. Nobody ever thinks about Hestia's importance on Mount Olympus until she is gone. And that's when they really have to confront what it was that she was doing for them all. Because that's our other myth about Hestia, that she gives up her throne to Dionysus. And there are consequences of that.
Yeah, I mean, your therapist decides I'm out, and gives her seat up to the guy who's like in charge of partying and ritual madness. Like, I don't think it's going to go well.
I love the idea of just showing up to your therapist meeting and Dionysus is there.
I can completely see the temptation, but like, definitely.
I can't imagine how this could possibly go wrong.
And for a minute, you're like, great. This is so much more fun than therapy. so that was Hestia. And that was immensely satisfying for me. So for Hera, she can be a listening ear, because I had to have somebody as well who was going to be sympathetic to Hera. It was a little bit like when I was writing a lecture and I had to create a whole character who didn't exist in mythology at all to be her friend, because she didn't have any. Yeah, so for Hera, Hestia could be that. And with the character of Demeter, there's, I think, a little bit more friction in the relationship between Demeter and Hera as I saw it. Demeter obviously has had one of Zeus's children already before Zeus and Hera get married. So she's Persephone of Courage, she is then has already been born. So there is possibly that rivalry that we've talked about that women kind of get tricked into. That is possibly present in some respect, because it's not just that she's had Zeus's daughter, but also that she's become free of Zeus. Like, Zeus did not marry Demeter. Zeus did not condemn Demeter to Hera's fate, which is to be tied to him forever. So I think that the kind of jealousy, if there is any there, probably comes not from the fact that Demeter has a child with Zeus, but from the fact that Demeter didn't have to marry him, I think is Hera's real issue. So there is some friction between them. I mean, they're sisters, and I love to build out sisterly relationships and to explore the dynamics that take place between women that are independent of their relationships with the male characters in their lives.
Is there a baby in your life who's about to start solid foods? This can be such a confusing and stressful time. As a mom of 7, I really struggled with spoon feeding my oldest baby. But once I realized that babies can safely feed themselves real, wholesome foods using the principles of baby-led weaning, feeding the rest of my babies became an actually enjoyable experience instead of something that I used to dread. Hi, I'm Katie Ferraro, college nutrition professor and dietitian specializing in baby-led weaning, and I host the Baby-Led Weaning Made Easy podcast. Each week, we cover evidence-based, safe infant feeding practices for parents and caregivers of babies who are 6 to 12 months of age. So, if you're confused by all the conflicting info you hear about starting solid foods, or you want easy, actionable tips on how to safely prep food for your baby, or introduce allergenic foods, or figure out when to drop a milk feed, we cover all that and more, plus interviews with the world's leading feeding experts in 2 new episodes each week. Search Baby-Led Weaning wherever you listen to podcasts, and happy feeding.
Throughout history, royals across the world were notorious for incest. They married their own relatives in order to consolidate power and keep their blood blue. But they were oblivious to the havoc all this inbreeding was having on the health of their offspring. From Egyptian pharaohs marrying their own sisters to the Habsburgs' notoriously oversized lower jaws, I explore the most shocking incestuous relationships and tragically inbred individuals in royal history. And that's just episode 1. On the History Tea Time podcast, I profile remarkable queens and LGBTQ+ royals, explore royal family trees, and delve into women's medical history and other fascinating topics. I'm Lindsay Holiday, and I'm spilling the tea on history. Join me every Tuesday for new episodes of the History Tea Time podcast, wherever fine podcasts are enjoyed.
No one hates history, they just haven't found the right teacher yet. Or in this case, a nerdy best friend who loves to tell you all about world history, women's history, and weird history. Hi, I'm TK, the creator of For the Love of History podcast, a place for people who want to learn more but don't know where to start, and history lovers who want to break from the mainstream. From rat trials to warrior women, we cover topics from every country and era. Whether you're a history expert or just starting out, there's a place for you here in the Time Machine. So join me every Friday on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube for a brand new topic. See you there. Bye.
This is one of the questions that actually this leads right into. Demeter and Persephone feature in Hera quite a bit. We get to see the story of Persephone from a different lens than what we usually see, which is focusing on the grief and powerlessness of Demeter when her daughter is abducted and her sister Hera is asked to give her blessing to the marriage. I love this angle because, usually we see Persephone-related retellings as like some degree of romance between her and Hades and exploring that relationship. What was it like getting to tell this story from Hera's point of view and also emphasizing Demeter's feelings in this story? Because I think that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the viewpoint, that we can't see it through Persephone's eyes in this novel because everything's what Hera sees, what Hera experiences. And so Demeter definitely takes the foreground there because that's who Hera can actually see. And the Persephone story, I mean, I've got mixed feelings about it because we have got a terrible story of a girl abducted by her uncle and taken to the underworld. And then I have read some really beautiful reimaginings of Persephone's story that I think genuinely empower her as a character, not just a kind of, we've made it romantic, but actually giving Persephone agency and choice within what she does. So I loved those versions, but that was not the version that fitted in Hera, and it's not the version that Hera is going to see because she's seeing Demeter's confusion and bewilderment and grief, which is such an incredibly powerful force that plunges the world into this eternal winter that threatens the survival of mortals completely. She might wipe out all of humanity. She is so distraught that her daughter has been taken from her and she doesn't know where she is. So for me, it's really a story about how powerful Demeter is and how she's been kind of keeping that hidden all of this time. And she had the ability to end the world if she chose to do it. This is the provocation. This is the catalyst, how much she loves her daughter. And she really holds the gods to ransom. They have got to restore Persephone to her. So it's like a really powerful moment for Demeter. And again, one that Hera watches and thinks, I can't do this. I cannot control Zeus. I have not got a threat big enough to hold over Zeus's head. So it's another way of reinforcing to Hera that she hasn't got that kind of control. She hasn't got the ability to do it. But also, there's an element of Demeter's myth which I came upon. I think I had heard it before, but I definitely hadn't thought about it for a long time, which is that while she is searching for her daughter, she becomes tired. And a horse comes along and she climbs on its back, and lo and behold, that horse is Poseidon, her own brother, who drags her to a cave and rapes her.
You can't even trust the horses.
No.
Poseidon is just... Zeus is the worst, but Poseidon, he gets this sort of, better rap than he actually deserves, because he's just this stealth, horror.
Yeah, and I wanted to include some of his bad behavior just to make that point.
I think it's really important, that section of the book, too, because I feel like so often, in so many retellings that I have seen, like the Persephone and Hades retellings that I've seen, Persephone's agency so often comes at the expense of Demeter. Demeter is whatever she's running from into the arms of Hades in the underworld in order to get her agency. It's like the myth almost sets up this dichotomy where if you're going to create a Persephone with agency, you have to have a bad relationship between her and her mom.
Yeah, and all her mother's trying to do is protect her. And in this world where women have got fewer options and fewer choices, there are so few ways to keep your daughter safe and so many threats against her. Yeah, why do we have to transform Demeter into this overbearing mother who Persephone actually can't stand and will flee to the world of the dead in order to get away from, when in fact she just really, really loves her daughter?
And just maybe doesn't want her to be kidnapped by her uncle.
Yeah, I think kind of trying to keep her daughter hidden from the Olympians on an island for a long time is the rational course of action. It's not like being really possessive and domineering. It's just going, yeah, guess what? Zeus and Poseidon are up here. You should be down there.
Absolutely, because they don't care that they're your uncle or your uncle daddy. They don't care. I mean, she knows how gross her entire family is. It's like, oh, just stay away from all of them.
Hera is the antagonist of so many stories in Greek mythology, and if she's not trying to keep a woman away from Zeus, she's punishing innocent children of Zeus's affairs, as we've discussed extensively. Which ill-fated lover or love child of Zeus did you feel the most sympathy for?
I did feel sympathy for them all. So I think my heart broke for Asteria because she's so caught in this. And I felt as well, isn't it kind of telling that she transforms into a rock when she falls into the ocean, which is where Poseidon is. You sort of think maybe she's just fleeing from everybody on all sides. and so has to turn herself into a lump of rock, something untouchable, something impenetrable, in fact, that the gods cannot do what they want to. So I really, really felt for that, and especially the idea that she retains some sense of herself, and so she's able to help her sister later. I thought that was a really tragic story. I felt really sorry for Echo, because she only has tragic stories.
Could you remind me what the Echo story is?
Yeah, so she is a nymph who Hera is searching for Zeus in the forest. She knows he's up to no good. She meets Echo, and Echo distracts her because Echo is a brilliant conversationalist. She's not yet Echo. She's not yet the nymph. She's not yet the voice that she will become. So she's able to entertain Hera with songs and with conversation and with dazzling stories, and she keeps her distracted until night falls. And Zeus has done what he came to the forest to do with the nymphs he came to do it with. And when Hera realizes that Echo has just simply been diverting her all this time, she takes her voice away and leaves her with the ability only to repeat the last couple of words that a speaker has said to her. You know, everything that made Echo who she was is taken from her. Her gift is gone, and she's left instead with this curse. It's such a speciality of the Olympians to do this to people. You know, these really kind of poetic, ironic, horrible punishments. And then Echo goes on to meet Narcissus and falls in love with him. And you have that story of him gazing into the pond, captivated by his own beauty. And when Echo tries to get his attention, she can only repeat his words, and she can't form any kind of connection with him. And when he dies, does she turn into a rock, or does she turns into something? She weeps herself into a puddle, or I can't remember her ending. I didn't include it, but she has a really sad story, and she didn't do anything that wrong.
Yeah, and it also makes me think of like the kind of mind, like the historical Greek man who may be telling these stories, who's looking around, maybe women too. I don't know who these stories originated with, but like looking around at various natural phenomena like echoes and thinking, oh, let's figure out an origin story that involves destroying the life of a woman.
Yeah, so that's so mean.
I know. It's like, let's just find a horrible story about women to explain this.
That would be such a fun way to explain where lactose came from.
The other one I always feel bad for is Io, who gets turned into a cow. And again, she doesn't want to be with Zeus. It's not consensual. And Hera sends this gadfly, horrible biting fly, to consistently harass and bite this woman who is now unconsensually a cow because Zeus. So let's talk about Zeus's many children, particularly the ones he didn't have with Hera. Zeus tends to favor his children by his lovers, both divine and mortal. How does this behavior, making Apollo, Artemis, Hermes, Athena, and Dionysus Olympians, literally their entire court is just his love children pretty much, how does this further drive the conflict between Hera and Zeus?
So I think Athena is the most egregious example. So I talked about Hera giving birth to Typhon with no male input involved there at all. So she's has the ability to do this. And like you said, in some of the myths, it's Hephaestus that she produces spontaneously. And Gaia obviously has the ability to create life from nothing as well. And Zeus gives birth to Athena through his forehead, but he has not created Athena. He has swallowed her pregnant mother. And that is how the embryonic Athena ends up inside his body and has to be put out with an axe in this really horrific section through the head. So I feel like that is such an insult that actually this is an ability that only goddesses have. Goddesses, and also that stingray in the aquarium recently that was in the news.
Oh yeah, I heard about the stingray.
Yeah, so again, I guess it's one of these things that perhaps people had observed in nature. I don't think it's just stingrays. I think in certain conditions there are female animals who can spontaneously produce young. Occasionally, I don't know how it works.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes in certain reptiles. Yeah, I think it's frogs.
Fish, I can't say, but that does sound like a thing that happens sometimes, yes.
Yeah, and so, maybe again, that's how it works its way into the myth. Who knows? As some sort of observation, sometimes this happens. But I guess people would go well, it's women who are giving birth to children, so they have got that ability. So I feel like when Zeus does it with Athena, it's like a horrible warped version. It's like, here you go, I can do what you can do, but I can only do it. It's so telling. He can only do it through violence. The violence that he's committed against Athena's mother. So that to me feels like the worst thing that he does. And then of course he elevates that daughter. Of course Athena becomes, his kind of right hand goddess in some ways, doesn't she? There's a whole lot of daddy issues involved there, I think. So yeah, I think there's a real symbolic element to that story, which is extremely distasteful and extremely upsetting from Hera's point of view, I think, and explains, again, we've got another rivalry between women, but I think that Hera and Athena pitted against each other until the Iliad, where they come together as quite unlikely allies, and actually their sort of teaming up in the Iliad is one of my favourite parts, when they're on each other's side and they're working together against Zeus. So I love that for both of them.
Who started the entire Trojan War over a beauty contest. Like, let's just really put that in there. Just remind people, this started over a beauty contest.
If you don't want the answer, don't ask the question.
Yeah, so that's what. So the question was about all the children of Zeus, the other Olympian children of Zeus. So yeah, I really felt like all of them are in some way. I think he installs all of them to distress Hera. I just think that his entire existence is dedicated to unsettling his wife.
So Jenny, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been absolutely amazing.
Thank you so much for having me back again. I'm so happy to talk to you again.
Absolutely. Where can people find you? And would you like to plug any of your existing books that are currently out in any places, anything like that?
Oh, so come and find me on Instagram, jennifer.saint.author, because I'm not really active on any other social media, and I am terrible at updating my website. So if you want to actually know what I'm doing, it's on Instagram. And Hera will be out in North America in August, so it's already out in the UK, but we've got Americans have to wait a little bit, apart from you two. We've got advance copies.
Yes, it's a perk of the job.
So look out for it in August. I don't know when this episode's coming out, so maybe people already have it.
Yes, once again, thank you so much. This has been such an amazing conversation, and thank you all for listening, and we will see you whenever we see you next.